So last summer, this board decided to do a phased approach, go with Broward Commuter Rail South, as well as to continue with the consensus building with the city of Fort Lauderdale on how to cross the New River. And we agreed to do a joint study. The joint study was the scope of services was agreed to, was developed and agreed to by both the county and the city. The county and the city, we used the contract that the city had with the MPO, used one of the MPO consultants. The county and the city participated in the selection process, the negotiation process, and the White House Group was the consultant that was used, and they've done a joint study. And we're going to hear today from Todd Brower, the president and COO of White House Group, who's going to walk us through, like I said, a short presentation on the New River crossing alternatives.
Just want to appreciate FDOT being here today, Phil. Thank you for being here, along with Vince and the team. So I know you've been working very, very hard.
And Amanda Chastain from the MPO as well.
Okay, there's Amanda. There's she. Okay, thank you.
Greg Stewart was out of town. He couldn't make it. And Corey Cuff.
I like Amanda better.
Corey Cuff wanted to be here, but she's being inducted into our high school Hall of Fame, so she could not be here, but she sends her regrets.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Todd.
Wonderful. Well, as Kevin had said, essentially the idea of this presentation is to give you the highlights, is to present the results of the study that we've done. And this was a collaborative effort. This was done with the city of Fort Lauderdale as well as Broward County. All of their staff was involved at different places. I'm going to actually go a little bit about how the project was managed a little later on in the process. But I want to start with how I'm going to present this story. And how I'm going to present this story is in a way that we actually did the work itself. So we had 7 tasks that we looked at, but we had a cascading, because in some cases, one task would help inform the other. However, there were some tasks that we were able to do concurrently. So we were able to look at NEPA scheduling at the same time that we started the cost estimates. So in many cases, we were going as quickly as we possibly could so we could meet this schedule. So I know the initial schedule was 6 months. We did this in 5 months. So we were able to meet that schedule to get these answers to you as quickly as possible, because it was important for us to make sure that you had the information to make decisions relative to this process. So with that, a little context, although Kevin's actually filled in most of this, as Kevin had said, this has been studied for some time. In fact, the last programmatic EIS, or Environmental Impact Statement, that was done by FDOT was done in 2008 by Scott Seeberger. That was presented looking at a lot of the different impacts and starting to really gather that information together. So you had a really nice foundation that you could work off of. This is obviously within your Primo plan, as looking at as proposed to a continuation of what you have going on in the South, which is already in the Small Starts program development. But the big crux is, how do you cross the river? That becomes the big bottleneck, and the big question that we all ask ourselves is, how do we get past that challenge? So our scope was to look at the 4 alternatives that was developed by DOT, by the Florida Department of Transportation. Now, they had developed 4 alternatives of how to cross the New River to enable commuter rail to occur. Through after 2019, there was a feasibility study that was completed, and they did a series of workshops to develop these 4 alternatives that we ended up looking at. We had 7 tasks, which were to start with examining all of the information that's been done, engaging the rail operators and the owners of the asset itself, estimating the capital costs, so how much would it cost, re-examining that. We also added, though, doing the operation and maintenance, so it's not just the cost of building it, but then what would you be on the hook for, essentially, as time progressed. Then how would you fund it? What is some money available to make sure that that could happen, that could help the county move that forward as well as with the city? And then how does that impact any environmental reviews or the NEPA process? All of that then comes together with why we're sitting here now, is to give you those results. So I wanted, though, very quickly just go over the alternatives. There were 4 of them. 3 are bridge, 2 are bascule, 1 is a fixed span, and then there's also a tunnel. Now, as you can see from the summary that I'm giving you, each one of them has a little different aspect to them, where they change in length and also how they would impact the Brightline station that's just north of Broward Boulevard. So you go from the first alternative, where you're looking at about 1.1 miles in project length with the approaches, to then up to 3.5 miles with the tunnel. So each of them has different lengths, which increases how complex the issues are and how we're going to look at it, and ultimately what it impacts, which can then have a big impact on how the costs are. So we started our our process with going to the owner and the operator that's currently on the system now, Brightline and FEC. So we learned from Brightline very quickly, and again, part of this process was always ensuring that your staff was involved. They actually helped us set up the meetings as well as the city of Fort Lauderdale, and they attended the meetings as well. Everything was recorded and sent back to them to see if we made sure that we heard them correctly, and they responded as such. Now, Brightline was interesting because they had actually said that they looked at 4 different criteria and how they looked at the 4 alternatives. So when they see preference, they see it as a business. They look at it as where are we going to spend our time and our money. That's what we find the most interesting. They had spent the most time on alternative 2, primarily because it had achieved 3 of their main 4 criteria that they were looking at: not disrupting marine traffic, the least disruption to their operations, and then financial feasibility. FEC had a different tact. They weren't interested in any of the alternatives as it related to freight because it didn't meet their 1%, exceeded 1% grade that they said wouldn't work for them. The real tidbit that came out of the conversation with them, though, was letting us know that there is we quoted astronomical amount of utilities that are under the right-of-way and under the river that they said, we don't even know all the things that are underneath there, but we know it's a lot. And you guys need to be prepared for understanding that that can absolutely impact how you look at the costs. So these are the costs. I know this is the big drum roll. This was really the basis of what we were looking for, was to get an idea of how close are the cost estimates. And as Kevin said, this has been studied a lot. There were many different cost estimates that were done for all 4 of the alternatives. What you're looking at here is year of expenditure, what we'd assume the time frame would look like for that. You'll see that the alternative 4 is about $3 billion. The blue is the capital costs. The orange is the operational costs, as well as the cyclical capital that would be required for it. So that really changes the scope of a lot of what we look at, because it's not just the cost of building it, but how do you maintain it? And a tunnel can add a lot of different complexities when you look at everything from ventilation, when you look at needing to do waterproofing, actually everything, oh gosh, let's see, I've got the list here. Life, fire, waterproofing, inspection, lighting, drainage, elevators. There's a lot related to that. So when you see that number, it's an important number, but the operation and maintenance side of it is about $176 million over that 50-year lifespan. So the largest portion of it, 81% of it, is actually all the replacements that you have to do that you don't do on a bridge. The other breakdown for operation and maintenance, it's about a half. So when you look at the orange number for the bridges, you're really seeing about half of that typically for the operation and maintenance, and then the other half for the cyclical capital that you'll have to replace the rails and items like that, check your concrete and things like that. So ultimately, that's how it ran down. For the most part, they were within line with FDOT. One of the things that I thought you would find interesting, though, that we looked at was the city of Fort Lauderdale gave us the study that they had done independently from Lochner looking at the tunnel specifically. They said roughly about 1.8 billion was about in line with what they would expect with the cost estimate at that. The interesting thing, though, in combination with the FEC saying that there's a lot of utilities that would need to be looked at, they had also recommended that there needed to be some kind of understanding that there needed to be a contingency. So we were about in line with what FDOT had also came up with about 1.8, but we added a 40% contingency related to that. Now, the other thing that I want to add that I think is important is to give you guys a buyer beware. I have a report from FTA. They go to Congress. They report regularly on the capital investment grants. So that's the program that you're currently in on the South. And they give us a understanding of how much estimates were and then what the total cost was. So this was done in 2020. So they were looking at projects that were completed roughly around 2000 to 2015. I pulled out 5. There were 45 projects. 5 of them were for commuter rail. Of what they had predicted at this stage, they were off by 50%. So when the actual cost of the project came in, it was 50% higher on average than any of the others for commuter rail. So this becomes very important because time is money in this case. And as you're all aware, inflation has been off the hook. Structural concrete has gone up 74%. Just from the last really 3 years from 2020, it's gone up 130%. Structural steel has also gone up, and we don't see an end of that in sight. In fact, we're a little concerned because with the infrastructure bill, one of the unfortunate indirect impacts of it is there's going to be a lot more construction and a lot more demand for these materials and not necessarily more supply. So we would expect them to continue to go up from there. So how could you fund it? The greater the complexity, and the greater the cost, the more likely then and the more difficult it is to fund it. So you'll see as you go along with this graphic that more and more of these grant opportunities to fund it through federal process start to fall off of it because of its complexity and how much money it costs. Now, the other thing too, I did a back of the envelope of all of the programs very quickly. Everything from CIG, those that enter into project development, as well as the mega grants, and as well as the other one that I looked at was RISE. Sorry, I was thinking Tiger. It's gone through many names. But you have about a 1 in 10 chance of all the applicants that are deemed eligible every year of getting a selection. So it is a very competitive process. So you have to be aware of that, and it's not a lottery, but it definitely means that you've got to have a really good application together to get that funding. So if you go down that area and you want to look at for federal funding, that trips NEPA. Now, one of the most important things about this process, though, is it's really not the beginning. This is the opportunity for the community, for yourselves to really engage in understanding, because this process quantifies what the impacts are for those alternatives. So you'll look at things like a no build. You'll look at operational analysis. You'll get more detail. A no build. What happens if you build nothing? What does that look like? Yep. So, and then that will also help refine your purpose and need, because often a need isn't just we don't have commuter rail. There are many other needs that are related to it. So that will be that process that will also then refine the funding program. So you really start to get in line with exactly how you start filling out those federal forms to understand everything from cost effectiveness and how strong your grant application can be. So with that, I want to always give a summary, because again, the intent of this was to inform you. That's how we looked at this. We looked at every opportunity that we did to understand what the costs were, going through as many models and as data as we could. This is a summary of how that funds out for capital cost, for operation and maintenance, funding opportunities, what are the perspectives of the owner of the asset, FEC, as well as those that have the rights to actually operate on the system itself, Brightline. I also added here a project delivery timeline. This is an estimate, and this is your best case scenario starting now. So even if you made a decision now, this is the best case scenario that you could use to deliver that project. So when you go back to those costs, that was based off of this. So you're still looking at roughly 10 years before you could get something on the highest end, 8 years at the other. And again, that's your best case scenario. Because particularly if you trip into the federal, you'll be looking at NEPA. You've got 2 years if you are an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement that's required. So you're going to be looking probably longer down the road for that. I like to give it illustratively. You'll see with the complexities of it, how it all starts to couple on top together. So when you look at costs, right-of-way impacts, environmental, social, you start to see that the greater the complexity, the greater the time it is to actually deliver it. And just as I mentioned before, today more than ever, time is money. These costs are going up astronomically. And with that, I'll take any questions related to our scope.
That's very gracious of you, Mayor. All of us commissioners have, some level of familiarity with what we're talking about, and I mean, it's been something that's been reviewed at the MPO level, for the 9 years I've been on the MPO. It's been reviewed by the SFRTA. And I know, Beam, you've been involved in some of these, studies and outcomes. The former District 4 Secretary, Jerry O'Reilly, had, discussed some of the challenges, that we were being confronted with. And one of the things that, I found interesting is there was a ridership study that showed that we would have, maybe a fair, perhaps average amount of ridership, with this commuter rail. and this is on the Eastern Loop. We're not talking about, you know, all the challenges we have with Tri-Rail on the west. I mean, we would have, you know, greater ridership. But when you start talking about getting the federal money, you know, that ridership study along with the environmental study are the big keys, and then the funding. So, in my opinion, the tunnel is way out. I mean, it was estimated years ago. I was hearing it being estimated at just about this first number of $1.8 billion. And, you know, it's interesting that you throw in the 40% contingency, you know, because of the projects that you used as an example, that they were on average 50% higher than what they had been, you know, estimated at the time that you know, initiated the project. Now, does that apply also for the bridges, or was that 40% contingency, you know, solely with the tunnel because of its complexity?
Yeah, so we applied that to the tunnel. We did do a contingency for the bridges, particularly because there was some real concern about how much structural concrete had gone up. It just wasn't at the same level that we had for the tunnel. Because what was really a challenge, and there were two things that were backing up that suggestion. As I'd mentioned, the city of Fort Lauderdale had done an independent study. Lochner had completed that. They had stated that they thought it should be in the upper range of about $2.6 billion with the contingency. When we looked at it relative to all the other projects, we actually bumped that up to 40, particularly because the data had shown from FTA that it could be up near 50.
All right. So when you start off with the 25-foot bridge, you're at like $300 million. Does that include some level of contingency also?
It does. It's just much more minor, so we're looking at usually anywhere between 3 to 5%. But as I said, as time goes on and it gets delayed, it could be more than that in and of itself. Because of all of those that I looked at for 45 projects, even those that are not commuter rail, it was somewhere in the range of almost 65%. They were off, they were underestimated. But we would expect that at this point in the project.
All right. So, you know, we spent months, perhaps, you know, a couple of years, trying to see if we could come to some consensus on a locally preferred alternative. And, you know, in my estimation, and perhaps Commissioner McKenzie, you could comment on this, it seemed to me that, you know, the biggest pushback we were getting was from the city of Fort Lauderdale. And I don't mean all of the commissioners, but, you know, a strong enough contingency that it kept holding it up with this pie in the sky, you know, belief that you could build this tunnel for about $1 billion. I mean, several years ago, it was estimated that it was going to be like $2 billion. And now, you know, I'm hearing $3 billion, which I think is far more accurate. So, number one, you will not be able to get federal infrastructure funding for a $3 billion tunnel when, you know, the federal government has hundreds of projects all around the nation. And it's like, you know, what are we going to fund? I mean, we can do commuter rail and, you know, pay 50% of the capital cost for a $300 million 25-foot bridge, or, you know, we can, you know, go through this long process and spend years and years, you know, hoping to get a tunnel. So I don't see the tunnel as a likely alternative. And hopefully something will happen and the Fort Lauderdale City Commission will decide by majority vote to go with the tunnel. If we can do that, you know, we can really, you know, make, you know, just a big change in, you know, our transportation system. It's something that we can manage, you know, with our penny surtax money, you know, going forward for like the next 25 years. And we're in a good posture, but we're not going to get the capital funding. The federal government, the Federal Rail Administration is not going to give it. So I'd like to hear, you know, if there's a consensus in what, you know, everybody else says, because I don't think we have to go around this, you know, for hours, because most of you are very familiar with this. And, you know, to me, I want to get it done. And, you know, you also have, you know, you got the bridge on 3rd Avenue, you got the bridge on Andrews, you got the bridge on 7th Avenue. So what's with this 25-foot span? It's just one more bridge that you have to navigate. And 90% of the boat traffic can get under the 25-foot bridge to begin with. So, you know, the largest yachts, you know, and the big sailboats, they've got to wait for openings. And I don't think that that's a unreasonable request there on the river. So, I'll demur to the rest of you, but my very clear recommendation is to go with the 25-foot bridge.
Did you want me to answer your question? I concur with everything you said. The issue is, and what's being put out there more so from the city of Fort Lauderdale, is that a bridge is going to divide a community. I represent both of those communities on the east and west side of those tracks. Bridges have never divided communities. Tracks have never divided communities. People and economics have divided communities. But that's what they're throwing out there to make it happen. So if nothing else today, I agree with everything you said, we just got to come out here with a clear, concise decision on what we want to do. And we got to communicate on your side that this doesn't divide us. I mean, you clearly can walk under a bridge and you look at all the illustrations. They're beautiful walking paths under those bridges. So I think we just got to make sure we keep that forward. So I concur with everything you said.
Okay. I'm going to be very brief. I concur with what Commissioner Ryan says. It's enough. I mean, I'm looking at this, $3 million is never going to make it, right? I mean, there's no,
Well, and something to consider, because MTA actually just released their financials on Wednesday. So it's the New York Transit System. And they had a project that they had reported to their commission in February that was $2 billion. It was now $3 billion as of last Wednesday. We're seeing this actually all over the country that prices are rising at astronomical levels.
and I think we just need to move ahead so that we can complete this. And I just think we should go with the 25-foot bridge. And as Commissioner Ryan said, I mean, 10% of the boats can wait until the bridge goes up. I mean, we're talking about millions of people that need this commuter rail and need this bridge to be there to make this effectual. So let's do it.
Kevin, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something that Commissioner Ryan said. You said hopefully the city will go with it and get a majority decision for, I thought I heard you say tunnel, but,
In a locally preferred alternative.
LPA he was talking
There's
about.
3 bridges and the tunnel, so there's 4 choices. And the State Department of Transportation is saying, what is the community's consensus on a locally preferred alternative?
and you were saying,
You said tunnel, you had said tunnel, you meant bridge.
You meant bridge versus tunnel. You had said tunnel.
There's 3 bridges and 1 tunnel.
Yes, Kevin, he meant bridge, okay?
just,
25-foot bridge.
And I concur a bridge. No, I'm saying, he asked me, so I concur with his bridge, not tunnel.
Mr. Dean, go on.
I'm going to be very brief also. This is getting to the point where it's becoming a little bit ridiculous. And I use that as a legal term. The only reason that we're here again at this meeting is because they came 6-8 months ago, and Mayor Trentalis, who I have a lot of respect for, I appreciate what he's doing, would not get off the idea of having a tunnel there. And they said, well, we can do it cheaper than everybody's telling you that we can do it. So we said, we're going to put these dollars in. We're going to do this joint study. You're going to pick the person. They're going to pick the person. We're going to have a scope of work. We're going to pay upwards of over $1 million, which we, maybe whatever it is. They're paying some, we're paying some. And when this comes out, that's basically going to be the decision. And now we're getting the goalpost moved again because they don't want to deal with that same decision. We don't have the money in this country to spend billions of dollars to build a tunnel. I know we have to borrow it from China because we're $35 trillion in debt, but let's put that aside for a second. They're not going to build a tunnel in South Florida right now. I turn the news on in New York and there's water pouring into the subway system they have. I get it. I know what Dean's trying to say. It's never going to happen. So my friends at the at FDOT and at the MPO tell us that we need to come together with a kind of like Greg Stewart's always told me, like a joint thing of what the local preferred alternative is. And the one thing that I'm happy about working with the 9 people that I work with up here, we don't agree with everything all the time, but it's 9 rational actors. And these 9 rational actors, I don't think there's anybody Even Bogan. I mean, if anybody up here, if anybody up on this 9 thinks, if anybody's up here on this 9 thinks that they're going to build a tunnel under this, they should say that I want a tunnel, I'll vote for a tunnel, because none of us are going to be here, but I would hate to be here on the off chance they started building a tunnel under Fort Lauderdale. When I went to LA to look at the tunnel they were building, first of all, it was way more than 10 years. This was like a 20-year project. The port project for the deepening and widening, they haven't started yet with all their NIPA things. We're on year 26 and there's been nothing done yet. So, and when they did the LA, when they're doing the, I forget what they call it, the crosstown thing, when they went under the ground there, they had no clue what was there. There was like a music thing on top and it was moving around their opera house, and anything that you can think of that would go wrong went wrong, and that's what will happen here. We need to do either alternative 1 or maybe alternative 2 if there was that kind of outcry for it. But we need to get across this river. The mayors and the cities to the north are making plans on this, and they're getting ticked off on this because there's no reason that the train should just stop in south of the river. And when we talk about everything that we talk about up here, this will help more for affordable housing than all of the dollars we're throwing into affordable housing. I'm sorry that I had to say that, Vice Mayor, but this will help more on affordable housing by giving people a cheaper place to live and be able to commute off of these trains. We all know we've had affordable housing issues, and we've had firefighters that have said, I'm going to live in Stewart. They figured this out. They're living cheaper. They're coming down here. Well, just think if they could do that and take a commuter rail down to do it. Let's do this already. Let's put this on the agenda. Let's us vote for a local preferred alternative. I know it's going to be close to 9-0 on some form of a bridge over there. Let's send this to Fort Lauderdale and let the people in Fort Lauderdale, let them see their elected officials go on record. What do they really want? Are they really voting to dig up under the city of Fort Lauderdale? I highly doubt it.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I have a series of questions. First, by the way, I'm happy to consider Bridge 1, but I had been leaning Bridge 2 because I thought of the marine industry, but I'll get to that in a moment. First, I remember at one of our last workshops on this, I was the one that had asked and said, let's come up with something where the county will pay half, the city will pay half for a study. Both would have to agree on who was chosen so that there couldn't be anything later that say, well, we don't like your study and we don't like. So, Kevin, I think I know the answer, but, the city has been saying that it wasn't really, they didn't really help choose, or they didn't have half of the choosing in the consultant. Can you answer whether that's accurate or not?
Well, I would say that's inaccurate. The city and the county work closely together. We came up with the scope of services. We actually went through the city of Fort Lauderdale's contract with the MPO to utilize the MPO's consultants. The MPO ran the solicitation with their consultants. The city and the county participated in that selection process. The city and the county, and I'm talking staff, help negotiate that agreement, because there was some scope revisions at that time to make sure we stayed within the $500,000 combined price limit. And
did the mayor or commission ever say, all right, we're going with, or the city manager ever agree, yes, we're going with White House?
Well, they voted, they approved the ILA, and attached to the ILA was the scope of services. It did not specify the White House group in that action, but the mayor and city manager met with White House group before the White House group kicked off their study.
I want the MPO to
Yeah, because,
Can you just come forward and put on the record, because I think you wanted something to say about this, okay? Just
Hello,
identify
Amanda
yourself, Amanda.
Kristen, Broward MPO Transit Manager. Yes, there were 3 parties on the selection committee, myself, Vince Reddy, and Ben Rogers from the city of Fort Lauderdale. We each independently reviewed the The proposal from White House Group, we each voted independently. We had a technical review committee that was recorded and available for anybody to see. There was no indication that the two, the county and the city of Fort Lauderdale, were not equal parties in the selection of White House Group.
They both said yes.
Thank you, Amanda.
They did.
Thank you.
Okay, that was my first, I'm sorry.
I'd just like to contribute one element because ultimately in the project management of this, and again, because I started with the idea of a joint, Kevin did, but I also want you to know that throughout the entire process that we went through, so every one of the technical memorandum actually, it references those interlocal agreements, but I also think what's important to know is that every Monday from the duration of this project, both co-managers were provided an email outlining everything that we've done and where every deliverable was. We met bi-weekly. Every time the co-project managers were there, they brought their staff involved. So there was a collaboration throughout the entire effort.
Okay, next question. It's been alleged to me that the reason this is so expensive is it has to go deeper and that you can build a tunnel much less deep with current technology or something like that. Comment?
Matt? Yeah, so in trying to do our due diligence, that was something that, because we knew that there was a publication that was done by the city that had referenced three individuals. I'd asked to see if there was any actual estimates related to that, any backup. It was reported back to me that there was no backup for those particular areas. So what the team did is they went across the nation and basically looked at all the different opportunities relative to tunneling, made sure that they modeled through it, and made sure that it was within that line.
Okay, Kevin, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I also believe that the Lochner Group, that $1.8 billion figure plus a 30% contingency was based on a different methodology than FDOT had put in there to get to that lower price. So I think there was alternative methodologies to do that.
Do you believe, having spoken with the other partners, Brightline, FEC, I'll leave out the city for a moment, although I guess we have to include them, Marine Industry Association, if we're looking at Bridge 1, the low level versus the mid level, is there a strong preference as part of this from from people we have to work things out with, Brightline, FEC, the marine industry, and the city, between the low level and the mid level bridge?
So just per the scope, the only ones that we talked to were Brightline and FEC. Now, we did talk with Phil at FDOT to get their perspective, but from the Brightline perspective, and again, I put it in, how does the business look at it? And time is money is where they think was meeting their four criteria. So ultimately, the one that disrupted traffic, marine traffic the most, their operations and financially feasible. Alternative 2 was the one that they had spent the most time on. Now, that didn't necessarily say that's the one that they would go forever, but if time is money, that's where they put their money. Any other stakeholder, we did not, that wasn't part of our scope.
Kevin, did you speak with the Marine Industry
Yeah,
Association
and-
also about 1 versus 2?
In prior communications with the marine industry, they were not in favor of option 1, the 25-foot, but they did say that there was a 40-foot option that's not on here that would be where they would be at, on the low side. So they would, excuse me? That was the marine industry.
Okay,
So-
and my almost last question is, I've been told that the city of Fort Lauderdale believes that they can get this done on their own with their paying for all of it and the county not having to pay for any of it. Candidly, I would be leaning, based on everything I've heard, towards the compromise 40-foot bridge, based on what you've just said, which would be between the 1 and the 2. However, if the city of Fort Lauderdale wants to do a tunnel and they can get it done on their own without the county having to pay anything for it, and we get appropriate sign-offs, I'm all in favor of letting them pay for everything. I don't think it will work, but if... No, that's not what they said. I mean, if they can pay for all of it, God bless them, let them do it, and we'll save the money, although I don't think that's realistic. And I would like, Mr. Mayor, in closing, for us to add option 5, which would be the 40-foot bridge, if that's something that the marine industry can live with and would be lower and cheaper to build than the others. So,
Before I start, what's the difference between the 25-foot bridge and 40?
15 feet.
You know what? I deserve it. I deserve it. What's the difference in cost between
ask
the
Tom.
15, between the 25-foot bridge and the 40-foot bridge? Not with respect to his smart-ass comment, please.
We don't have that alternative. That was not one of the 4 alternatives. That was something that we are.
I was just curious.
We are.
Listen, excuse me, I got the floor here.
Between the 50, between the 25 and the higher one?
Okay, listen, okay, with respect to Commissioner Ryan, Commissioner Rich, Commissioner Udine, I agree with them. I want to get this thing going. I don't know why we get on an agenda, and let's get this thing moving. Enough talking about the tunnel, it's ridiculous cost, and let's move it forward. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Furr. I should have probably gone first, but that's okay, because I got some more information, but go ahead. I'll wait to the end, go ahead.
That ain't happening.
I'll never say that. You said,
That's not happening, ever.
that you needed to get that trip to the Netherlands now.
I know. The methodologies to get to the numbers. These are you found your methodology was independent of how FDOT got to theirs?
That is correct. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of this. And again, we're a planning firm, so we don't do engineering. There's no conflict of interest. I know you just had your workshop relative to that. But yeah, we followed all the standards required, and it was completely independent. But we did work with the city as well as your staff as we developed them and gave them the drafts to review and comment on.
Okay, because I think that's important. Because FDOT did a lot of work previously. And I think what we were looking for was either confirmation of their work or invalidation, one of the two. And yours seems to fall in line. Obviously, as years gone by, it's more expensive. So given that, I do think that the number is somewhere between 25 and 40 feet. I think that's where this should fall. I do think also that if Fort Lauderdale is going to build a bridge there, it does need to be a good-looking bridge there. It does. And it can't just be a function. I don't think you're asking for a functional bridge, just a functional bridge. And I think that's where you're looking at, because this is going to line the landscape. I mean, it's going to go right where, if we put a government center there, it's going to go right in front of it. There's a lot of things about it that we need to be taking into consideration. The last thing is the time frame is just way too long as far as I'm concerned. And I know that's because, and let me just confirm this, that is because you're being dependent upon federal grants, correct?
Yeah, anytime that you're tying it to federal money, it can increase the time frame, particularly even on the procurement. So it's time and cost just to go through the procurement process.
Okay.
When you're looking at NEPA, it can be up to 2 years.
Okay, and I'm just going to throw this out there without getting into too much. If you didn't go through federal grants, that time frame can be different.
Correct, it can be different. But
And-
you don't
and
know
there's
what you're
way-
dealing with yet, but it can be different.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, that's where I'm going to land on this bridge somehow. Because the maintenance costs on that tunnel was way up there. I mean, that's what of all the information I got from you on this, that was the most telling. Because I actually thought it would be less. I don't know why I thought it'd be less, but I thought it would be less. But it's and I guess I never saw FDOT's and Phil, did you all do an estimate?
Phil's here, he can answer that
Yeah.
question
Did you ever
if
do an
want.
estimate on the maintenance for bridges and the tunnel? Only because I saw your cost of building it, but I never saw your maintenance and operation costs.
Phil Schwab, in-house consultant at FDOT, and yes, we had done a very high-level estimate for operations and maintenance of the tunnel. But
Did they?
there was a lot not included in that estimate.
Okay, do you feel like the numbers that White House came with confirm what FDOT was saying?
From the cost standpoint, it looks reasonable. The operations and maintenance, I don't have as much information or knowledge of, so
Okay.
I would trust that they're
Only
going through a methodology that anybody would support.
Okay, because I think that is a part that will eat up the surtax and money faster than anything we've got. And so, and if we're going to be able to operate this entire Primo plan, there's lots of other maintenance and operation costs that we have to take into consideration. And this would just simply deplete a huge amount of that. So with that, I'm ready to go forward on this. Either somewhere between 25 and 40. I think that's where the.
Okay.
What do you?
That's what makes it.
Inches?
No. I didn't know what you were talking about.
Oh, okay.
Just remember the 25-foot covers 90% of all
Right.
marine.
And the 40 foot is 99.
Right, but I mean, we've got 90% with 25 feet.
Right. Okay. So with that, I'm ready to move it forward as fast as we can.
Sure.
And look at all the options that allow us to move this much quicker than just the time frame that was shown. And we can talk about that stuff later.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McKenzie?
Move the bridge forward.
All right. Commissioner Rogers? And I'm going to talk about some ease and so forth in a minute, what we've had, but go ahead and finish up, Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. Listened to everything, and I could say ditto to everyone. But I just wanted to say, when you listed partners and you named the marine industry and Brightline and FEC, I did not hear us talk about the residential communities surrounding where we were going to be starting that incline, whatever it is, if we're considering the bridge, right? I just want us, and I'm glad in this conversation, I'm also hearing about maintenance, because when we built condos, we didn't tell folks that in 30 years or 50 years, you have to be maintaining that infrastructure. That was never something discussed. I see Fort Lauderdale constantly building houses and high-rise, and folks expected that they would still have the views that they're enjoying today. So I'm trusting that when we hit the road and we're talking, we are open and honest. Realtors should be accountable. We're in buyers beware. We are protecting those that are investing currently now before we decide on whether or not it's a 25-foot bridge or a 40 or a 50, whatever that number is. We need to make sure folks are aware of what we're proposing to do, not when you get started in this project. That's the only thing I want to put on the table in addition to everything that was said. I believe that we should move forward with our bridge, whether or not it's 25 or 50 or in between, that if that's the way we're going to go, when we look at the numbers and what we can afford, I see us affording bridges, not tunnels. And I'm not going to sit here and have us spend all of our surtax dollars on just one project. We have to talk to the 31 municipalities when we change the plan. When we voted, we know what we voted for, and yes, we can be flexible, but not to the point where we're going to be sacrificing other projects that's on the table. Thank you very much.
Devin or Todd, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, if I may, because you bring up a very good point about the public. And one of the things I'd mentioned in the presentation, after the 2019 feasibility study, these alternatives were developed through public workshops. And as you go through the planning process, you'll continue, any kind of PD&E is going to continue to engage the public throughout the process. And as you get more refinement, then it helps the designers improve those items.
Finished, Commissioner? Commissioner Rogers, you finished? Okay. So just kind of bring everybody up to date, and it's on behalf of the commission, have desperately been trying to work with the city of Fort Lauderdale and with the MPO and with FDOT and et cetera, to kind of bring this thing into a landing, because you're right, time is money, and I say that all the time, but time is of the essence when it deals with federal money. We are now in October of '23. And so in my opinion, we have until November 24, because we do not know what's going to happen in the election cycle at the president's level, and will this money continue to be there or not be there. So we can no longer afford to wait. As Senator Gale talked about, we'll let the Fort Lauderdale do this and that first, and if that doesn't work, and then we can come back and we can, do a bridge or whatever. So, and obviously the marine industries has always kind of been in the equation as well. So the city of Fort Lauderdale, their team, the county's team, including Mayor Trantalis on his team, and our team were there, the MPO. Todd was there, I think, a time or two, and we came together and we had a few meetings. And we tried to talk about how we can build consensus. And these meetings were recorded, so I'm not breaking any confidentiality or anything of that nature. But it came out that Mayor Trantalis and their team and our team, everybody agreed that it would behoove us to do a 25-foot bridge and do what they call cut and covers on Sunrise Boulevard and Broward Boulevard, starting with Broward, basically, and either going to Sunrise, Sistrunk. We talked about other alternatives, but the main one was Broward and Sunrise. The cut and cover basically means that if you're going east-west, you kind of come under an overpass, kind of a situation where the train continues on, and it's very well designed. There are grants that are available to that, opportunities to do that, and so Mayor Trantalis and myself, and we all agreed that's the path we need to go. And then as we leave these meetings, and again, they're recorded, and we're all saying we're in consensus here, we're moving forward in this vision. And then and it just begins kind of unraveling, you hear FDOT says this, you hear MPO says this, and you hear Fort Lauderdale does this, and Broward, and it just goes into just as this haywire of a hurricane storm. But again, 2 times on the record, everybody agreed that's the way we wanted to go to. The marine industry said, okay, now a 25-foot bridge would not work. So I talked to Phil Barcel and said, okay, what would work? He says, I'm going to bring to the commission meeting, I think he said to me, I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to bring an outline of a 13-foot boat whaler, Boston whaler. So we need 13 more feet more than 25. That's 38 feet. Okay? So 40 foot would be perfect. In his mind, that's what I got him saying. I think I took notes on that they would not be opposed to a 40-foot. Went back, we talked, and said, hey, can we get some visuals of what a 40-foot or 38-foot? I mean, if you want, it's 2 feet of difference. That's what the marine industry said, 25 to 38. We'll do that. So we were waiting on those visuals. In the meantime, we had other visuals as well on what the cut and covers would do. We can share those, by the way, Todd, if we want to, the commission sometime, Monica, we can do that, because it's very impressive. So again, we come out with this, as the Pope with the smoke signals, right? 25-foot cut and covers, we're all good, and then it goes haywire. There is no more time, folks. We have to react now. And a 38 or 40-foot bridge, like Commissioner McKenzie says, and even Commissioner Rogers said, well, we're concerned about where it's going to go. Well, you can do a lot of things with bridges. You can light them. You can have activities underneath them. You can do a lot of things in technology today, and obviously the ultimate cost is what it's going to be. I've heard you don't have to go 80 feet now. You have to go 30 feet down. There's no more need to worry about having an elevator up. I've heard all these things. I've heard it costs $50,000 a linear foot to do a tunnel. I've heard it all. But nobody puts it in writing. Nobody gives it to me or anybody in writing that this company in Germany will build this for $50,000 a linear foot, which would only cost $900 million, right? So you keep asking. You keep asking the city of Fort Lauderdale. You keep asking these experts. And I get compassionate about it because I've been dealing with it, so please forgive me. But I've been dealing with it, and I keep asking, give me something in writing. Just, it's great. You want to build a tunnel? Wonderful. It's going to cost $700 million. That's wonderful. Give it to me in writing, and it never comes. So again, time is of the essence. Time is money. We have to react now. Can we indeed, I'm asking staff, can we indeed move on our own to a, quote, 40-foot bridge and start the process now? I can tell you that representing north of the river, I have all the mayors They're like pit bulls right now. They're on leashes, okay? I'm ready to let them loose because we promised them, folks. We committed to them. And I agreed only to the south end if we get to the north end. City of Oakland Park is building their city hall. They're building affordable housing based around their station right now. They're not waiting. City of Pompano Beach is doing the same thing. City of Deerfield Beach is doing the same thing. We cannot let these people down. And we need the commitment from this commission to get over that river in the most efficient, cost-efficient way that we can do it in the most timely manner. So I'm not going to give that up because, I only agree to the south. I remember that, Commissioner Furr, if we get over to the north. So I need to look at legal. I'm looking at staff. How do we ultimately, can we do it by ourselves? Do we need an LPA with the city of Fort Lauderdale, or do we not? What do we do to move this forward as soon as possible?
Here, let me just suggest, it sounds like we have a consensus here. Why don't we go ahead and put this on the next regular agenda for the county commission and decide, whether you want to go
I do,
25 or 40-foot bridge, and if it sounds like a 40-foot bridge, would we be able to have some kind of rough estimate about what the increase in the cost is from 300 million to what? Another 100 million or what?
I respect that, Commissioner Ryan, but I'm asking a question. I want to see what the process is now. We can discuss it, we can have it on the agenda, but I'm trying to get the data and the information now, so when we go into our meeting, we understand what's going to happen.
Got it, Mayor.
And I'm not trying to fault you, Commissioner Ryan, but I know I've talked about it with staff and even with legal. How do we get there, and can we get there on our own, or what do we need to do? And then we'll put it on the agenda.
Okay, and I'm going to answer two questions in there, and I'm also going to defer to the consultant over here who probably has more expertise in this area. It's my understanding as the owner operator of the rail line, the county is the one who determines a locally preferred alternative that then goes up to the MPO for approval or disapproval.
Okay.
To answer your other question, before going forward, the 40-foot has been looked at. I think there is some evaluation that needs to be done, some additional information on cost, whether that would work, because you're coming into an incline and where the station is, we want to make sure that there's enough track room to get in there, and whether it has to be coupled with a cut and cover. So I do know on the MPO, they're putting forth an item to have the White House group who did the grade separation, the cut and cover that you talked about, to continue that work, to do the bridge and show how it all would work. And I think that's on their next agenda, which is either this week or next week.
Amanda says it's on November 2nd's agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, though, Amanda, is it the second, or I actually think it made it to this agenda? Yeah, for the executive committee, yeah.
To the executive
Yeah,
committee.
and just to confirm, Kevin was absolutely correct. So is the project sponsor. The LPA comes from the commission. But one of the important distinctions that you'll get when you get your letter from FTA, if you go into project development, it will also ask not just for an LPA, but they'll ask that LPA be in the fiscally constrained long-range plan that's adopted by the MPO. So Kevin's absolutely correct. That is the process. So you don't want it illustrative. You want it as fiscally constrained. The LRTP or MTP is being updated as we speak, so it could be incorporated within that. As Amanda and Kevin had mentioned, yes, we were asked to take a look at it, and the visuals that you saw where you could really get a feel for what does this really look like for our community, how would it impact them. We will be looking at that 40-foot option, because when our engineers looked at that, and I know I'm going to have some questions for Phil as well from that group, but they're rail engineers from Chicago. This is what they do. When they looked at that, they saw ways that they could actually speed up the construction. They did ask that of Brightline to make sure that they weren't interrupting operations. And so it's called a hammerhead option is what they're looking at it, basically redoing the tracks a little bit to make sure that they could also get the grades right to make it happen. Because they're going to look at everything from the comfort of the passenger, because you don't want the grade too high coming down to a stop where then people are falling over. So there's a lot of different planning aspects to this that we'd have to look at. If it gets approved by the board, I'm going to look to try to do a turnaround of 30 days. is what I've asked the team to be able to
30
do.
days?
30 days from a notice to proceed. I've got to work with them to make sure that we can do that. When we had talked about it earlier, trying to move it forward at the last board, the team said that they could do that, so I'll confirm that. But that's what we're going to be shooting for. 60 days is what we put in the contract, but I'm going to move that up just like we did, getting this done in 5 months instead of 6.
Okay, and also, when we talk about the bridge, we want to include the cut and covers that we talked about. I want to put those in, I'd like to have those
Correct.
in the item for the board's discussion and approval, because that's part and parcel of what we originally agreed to, right? Because I think that makes sense on everybody's part, even City of Fort Lauderdale as well.
That's correct, and it'll have all the
So
quadrants of the new river.
I'm just looking for staff interlegal to see when the soonest we can get it on the agenda to make it feasible for us to move forward with it, I guess. And Commissioner Ryan's right, whether it be a 25 or a 40, maybe that's the options we have, A or B, but I don't want to put it on too soon, so we defeat our own purpose. When we do it, I want to do it right. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes. 100%.
All right. Again, apologize for the compassion, but it's just been a roller coaster like no tomorrow.
All right,
Yes.
is this meeting adjourned?
Hold on, Senator Geller.
Mr. Mayor, I have one additional question. I agree with you on probably the 38, 40-foot bridge. I think that sounds like it's the way to go. I am not necessarily as convinced on the cut and cover, and I'd like some discussion on that. I've heard of a cut and cover, so what I am concerned about is if that means that we're going to build, I guess it's a tunnel under.
It's not a tunnel. What I'm going to do, Senator, is as soon as possible, can staff immediately get with each commissioner and go through that video? Because I think it'll answer everything you have.
All
Right
right,
now,
'cause
I promise you it will.
The only concern that I have on that, you've heard me say this about rail down Broward. I don't want Broward Boulevard disrupted for 10 years of construction.
No, I agree.
That's
agree.
my concern. Maybe it's not a real concern.
I agree
I've
with
never
you.
heard of this cut and cover. So
Yeah, but you'll
I'd
be
like to
most
see more.
impressed with it once you see it. It's really amazing. And the new technology they have today, as far as flooding, et cetera, is all there to prohibit it from that.
But you understand my concern.
Yes, sir.
So the cut and cover concept comes because no matter what we do here, the freight trains are still running at grade no matter what. So this is a way to
Correct.
alleviate all that. Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. So again, let staff as soon as possible. I know it was whoever
do that.
presented that, but let's get
We'll
with
do
each
that.
commissioner on that, okay? All right, good thing. All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Very good.
Thank
All right.
you.
All right, this means adjourned. All rise.